In the evening, Vadim received a phone call from Olga, the wife of his close friend Anton, who cried that her husband had been arrested by the police. When Vadim heard the news, he was extremely surprised because he had known Anton since childhood. They went to kindergarten together, then went to school together in the same grade. He was best man at their wedding and later godfather to their 2 children. And then there was this. Vadim could not understand the reason for the arrest because the woman was crying into the phone receiver and spoke incoherently. Once upon a time, Vadim had served in the internal affairs agencies as a child inspector with the rank of lieutenant of police, but after 3 years, realizing that it was not his calling, he quit. But he kept his connections there. Vadim, is that you? Hi. What brings you here so late? Said with a smile the stocky police captain, with a red puffy mustache, on duty at the department, standing up to meet Vadim. The wall clock showed 21 hours and 30 minutes. Greeting the officer on duty, Vadim explained that his close friend Anton had been detained, but he did not know the reason. The officer on duty shouted loudly to his assistant surgeon, "Sonia, look in the register of detainees, there is a man named Anton there." Then, turning to Vadim, continued, "Today PPS brought some people in, then later in the evening, there were 3 more calls. Comrade Captain, there is one." At 18 hours and 25 minutes, the detainee's wife called and said that her husband had beaten her. The assistant on duty's voice was heard. Vadim was left beleaguered that Anton raised his hand on his wife, in whom he did not want. This could not be. As if reading his thoughts, the captain said with a sadness in his voice, "Vadim, everything can happen in this life. You served in the police, you have seen a lot." Vadim stood stock still. Suddenly, he remembered how once in the countryside, when he and his friends gathered with their families, Anton raised a toast to his wife, saying with a loud and solemn voice, "I'm afraid to jinx it. I have the most beautiful and beloved wife, my Olga, whom I love more than life. Vitya, listen, arrange a meeting for us, please." Vadim asked the captain, "There is something wrong here. My friend cannot raise his hand against his wife." The officer on duty thought, looked around, and whispered, "Okay, but come back late at night, when the bosses leave." "Great, thanks friend," said Vadim, then swept up and whispered too, "Look, don't have dinner. I'll bring everything you need. We'll eat together in the old memory." From what he heard, the captain cheered up sharply. By 12 o'clock at night, Vadim came into town with a large bag in his hands, from which he could see the bottleneck of vodka and a pleasant smell of shashlik. The man on duty jumped up to meet him and falsely chagrined him. "What is it, Vadim? Why did you spend so much money, buy so many things?" And then immediately, without waiting for Vadim to answer, in a commanding voice, ordered his assistant, "Sanek, set the table in the recreation room and do not let anyone in. Yes, bring that Anton here because of the bum. Do it." Vadim and the captain went into the recreation room of the guardhouse, where a couple of minutes later the surgeon brought Anton. Anton, like Vadim, was 35 years old. They looked alike, both thin, medium height, brown-eyed. They both had their own small business. "What are you standing there? There is no truth in your feet," said the man on duty to Anton, smiling, while closely watching his assistant laying the table, deftly pulling out of the bag different things. "Sonia, sit at the console, we will have dinner, and then you will come." He turned to him. When the door behind the surgeon closed, the captain took out 2 cut glasses from the nightstand, then looked at Anton, and after thinking about it, took out a third. The captain poured vodka into 2 glasses, and after stirring for a few seconds, poured into the third. Turning to Anton, he said sternly, "The detainee, that after dinner in the monkey house he should not make any noise, but lie down on the bench at once and stand down." Saying these words, the captain of the picture raised his glass, and without touching the edge with his lips, slowly poured the liquor into himself. Having squinted and grunted heartily, The captain sniffed a crust of bread, took a piece of kebab, and was just beginning to eat when the voice of his assistant was heard. "Comrade Captain, the patrol brought a drunken man." The officer on duty sadly looked at the piece of pork in his hands, then, with his eyes around Vadim and Anton, said, "Well, you guys talk to each other for a while, and I'll go and see who they brought." When the door behind the captain closed, Vadim carefully looked at Anton, who was sitting at the edge of the table with his head down. "What happened, Anton? And why did you hit Olga?" Alarmed, Vadim asked his friend. Anton sat on the stool, his head bowed, and silently looked at the toes of his shoes. The pause lingered. Suddenly Anton lifted his head and blurted out angrily, "Yeah, I should have killed her." Vadim could not believe his ears. Nevertheless, pulling himself together, he asked his friend to calmly tell him what had happened in his family. Anton kept silent for 3 minutes, and then, a little worried, he started to speak. "Vadim, you know how I love, or rather loved Olga. I worshipped her, carried her in my arms. Lately, when things were going well for me, Olga wasn't working. She was taking care of the house and the children. I noticed for a long time that she was always on the internet, communicating with her friends, posting her photos in social networks, taking numerous selfies and other things. Somehow I decided to play a trick on her, and a month ago, I opened a fake profile on a dating site. In the evenings, I would visit Olga's page and like her photos. As a rule, at such times, I was either at work or in the next room in our apartment. I was interested in her reaction, which was not long in coming. A few days later, Olga wrote to me and thanked me for the likes. So we struck up a correspondence. I called myself Sergey and told her that I had my own business. At some point, I sensed that she began to show interest in me, and I did not expect how far it could go. Then the door opened and the person on duty came in. When he saw that my friends had not touched the food or the liquor, he looked at them in surprise, but said nothing. Coming to the table, the captain poured himself a glass of vodka, drank it, and sniffed the edge of the cooler. Snacking on a salty, crispy cucumber, he went out, closing the door quietly behind him. Vadim sat silently at the table and lit a cigarette. Walking the duty officer to the door, Anton continued his narration. One day, late at night, I texted Olga from the next room, and after that, I went straight into the bedroom, where she, lying in bed, was typing on her iPhone. I asked her who she was talking to so actively. "Just a friend," was her answer. Then I went back into the next room and continued talking to Olga. And she texted me, "Can you imagine, Sergey, I almost got caught." Suddenly, my husband came into the room and asked who I was chatting with, and I put up smiley faces. That's how we communicated with her every day, usually in the evenings. She's in the bedroom, and I'm in the next room. During another correspondence, I asked her if she loved her spouse. Her answer shocked me. "He is not bad. I got used to it, but he is not the man of my dreams." But Olga tortured me, Sergey, where I lived, where I worked, how many children I had, whether I loved my spouse, whether I cheated on her, and so on. I answered all her questions in good faith. At this point, Anton stopped talking. Vadim felt he was about to hear the most important thing that had happened the night before, and decided not to rush things, to wait until Anton was talking again. I asked her directly if she could cheat on her husband, if she was ready to cuckold him. I wanted Olga to be rude to me, to stop communicating with me, but she wrote, "I'll answer tomorrow. Mine is at home, can at any time, again unexpectedly enter the room. Vadim, can you imagine my condition?" Anton blurted out excitedly. Then the duty officer came in again, and when he saw that the food had been left untouched, he became indignant. "What is it, men? You cannot. Stop talking. Take your glasses. There, that's it. Now, let's drink." After drinking vodka and eating, the men began to eat. The captain turned to Anton. "I don't know you, but if Vadim is here, it means you're a good man. Your detention will be processed tomorrow morning. So if your wife comes in the morning and writes a statement saying she has no claims against you, they'll let you go. If she doesn't, we have to send her for a forensic examination, and then you know what happens. I'll take care of that," intervened Vadim, who had already begun to roughly understand what had happened in his friend's family. The captain hurriedly took a snack, excused himself, and said that more detainees had been brought, and that he had to process them, and left the room. After the officer on duty left, Anton drank the rest of the vodka in his glass and continued, "Vadim, imagine my condition. At night, I'm lying in bed, Olga next to me, with her back to me. I could barely keep myself from waking her up and telling her that it was me, Sergei. But something held me back. I wanted to know what she would answer, whether she was ready to change, but at the same time, I was afraid of her answer. I couldn't sleep until morning. The next day, I waited until evening, and from work, I went online to her page, where there was already an answer to my question. I thought long and hard about it, and I guess I did. I could cheat on my husband. My eyes went black, I felt sick, I almost fainted. Pulling myself together, I put up a smiley face and texted her, "You're a good girl," and immediately offered to meet her in the evening, hinting that today she has a great opportunity to cuckold her husband. And that was her answer. Where and what time to meet? I called the place and time to spare, giving myself the opportunity to drive home. On the way home, I nearly had 2 car accidents, my eyes were spinning. When I got home, I saw Olga standing in front of the mirror, admiring herself, putting on makeup, and so on. I asked her where she was going at such a time, and I heard that a friend was waiting for her, and that they wanted to go to a cafe. I remember the rest vaguely. Now I'm with the police. In the morning, Vadim talked to Olga, who, despite the black eye, came to the city police department and wrote a statement saying that she had no claims against her husband. Just like that, we hushed up the case. But Anton did not forgive her for the betrayal and filed for divorce. Next story. She was shocked when I found out how I decided to get back at her. Her life would never be the same again. My wife and I have been married for 27 years. We have 3 children, a son 25 years old, daughters 20 and 5 years old. I am 50 years old and my wife is 47. I had my 3rd child at the age of 45. My wife was 42. I don't have a potbelly. I am not bald and bald. On the contrary, I have thick hair, though it is already half gray. But my wife and acquaintances say it does not spoil me. I know that women like me. I do not smoke and practically do not drink. My potency is also all right, and that's not bragging. With my wife, before all this sordid history, sex was regular, mostly in the morning, as the most productive, since the body is rested. And with this, not once every 6 months or a month, but at least 3 times a week or even more often, every morning or every other day. Everything was varied enough. We did not have any forbidden topics in terms of intimacy. I did not cheat on my wife during all these years, even though I had had women before her. I loved her. Besides, I was a bit squeamish. I didn't need anybody else, and she was my own. Everything about my wife suited me. I knew every millimeter of her body. I knew what she needed and what she enjoyed the most. And she knew. That's why everything was fine here. She hadn't once in all the years given him any reason to doubt her either. Not once until recently. We were supposed to celebrate our 27th wedding anniversary this summer. I wanted to go to Cyprus with her, but then this virus, be damned. But it was nothing. In February, I got something that I felt like my face was hit against a concrete wall, and even ran over a roller. It is all banal. Office romance. And as I was told, even before the new year it began with her corporate party. I don't know how true it is, but it doesn't matter. And what an actress. Anyway, she was turned in by her own employees. Some lady, maybe a rival eliminated, I do not know. But a fact is a fact. He's 6 years younger than her. He's 41. He has a wife, a 14-year-old daughter. He himself holds a position just above my wife's, hopefully ex-wife's position after all. Their first intercourse took place during a corporate party in his office. But I know this by hearsay. They were well-coded. They did not write anything to each other, so the correspondence does not catch them. But she relaxed. One night, I understand, he didn't close his office door. Must have been in such a hurry to get some privacy. So the ajar door and filmed them on his cell phone. This video was sent to me from an unknown number. My first impulse was to hit her. Good thing she wasn't home, even though I had never laid a hand on her in my life. Then I cooled down a bit and started thinking about what to do. Go to her lover in the face to give? Not an option. Then I decided to deal with him. The fact that I will not live with her anymore, it's not a question, but what to do with the joint property. I have a company that I myself raised, and I'm not going to split it in half. So I decided to withdraw the assets first, and then get a divorce. I pretended I didn't know anything. I do not know how I managed to keep an external calm. The enemy cannot envy. But I stopped kissing her after all, and the intimacy between us ended. I told her I wasn't feeling well. At my words about the sickness, even worried. Asked to go to the hospital, but looking at her caring eyes, wanted to put it well. But held on. Sold my car. There was a reason. I wanted to change it. Then sold her car, said there was an option to buy a better one. I took the money. The self-isolation helped with the firm, at least one plus. I let all the employees go home. You know, that was the way it was supposed to be. Then I paid their salaries and fired them due to bankruptcy. Took the money out of the accounts too. I started the liquidation procedure. At the same time, I started registering the same firm in my mother's name. Wife didn't know anything, waited for a cool car. We only have a 2-bedroom apartment in a new building, but there is nothing to do. But we will not divide this house. My wife is a bummer. The thing is, the land there belonged to my grandparents. They had a house there. The village is ruined, but the place is great. The river, the forest. Cottages began to appear. After my grandmother died, my mother inherited. The old house was demolished. Built there a 2-story, beautiful, neat house, which my wife and I dreamed of since my youth. We actually lived in that house. I know my wife adores this house. Together with her, we planned everything there. Planted a garden, beds with flowers, swimming pool. Well, I had one time to re-register it to myself, although my mother offered. Toward the end, my wife smelled something. She began to ask questions, including why I was unkind, why I didn't kiss her, why there was no love in the morning. She was alive. And most of all, I feel sorry for our 5-year-old daughter. I love her. I love all my children, but this little girl especially. After all, she is our afterbirth, my favorite girl. And so at the end of April, my wife and I had a conversation. She must have felt that something was wrong. I looked. She was shaking. I showed her the video. She fell on her knees, saying, "I'm sorry." I asked her why. What was wrong? She said that she had made a mistake, that she did not understand what she was doing. Her son turned away from her. The eldest daughter was running back and forth between us. She blamed her too, and the youngest daughter did not understand why her parents did not live together. So she has nothing left. No car, no money, no company either. And what did she achieve by crossing out everything we had? People do all kinds of nonsense in life, and in the end, they call it fate. I recall the words of someone dear to me. I am the eldest daughter in a family with many children, and this is an obligation. Since childhood, I knew that I had to be an example, always tried to be the best, went to the other end of town in the best school physmatic. My parents were passive, and my father was never able to make it in life, although he had more than a chance. I have a sharp, explosive, strong character. I did not respect my father because he made me literally beg him for money. I was fiercely protective of my mother, and for that he often hit me hard, even though I resisted, and could slap him with all my might with pleasure. I remember once, when I was little, about 10 years old, after he beat me with a chair, I swore to myself that I would break him and leave home, live an independent life, where no one would boss me around. There was no intimacy as such with my parents. I talked myself into transferring, persuaded myself to let go to study. For all my achievements, movement forward, desire to learn, to change something, I was not told a word. Although at school, and later at uni, everyone loved me and I was a leader. 3 years of frantic classes at the new Lyceum. Humiliation from my dad's rich daughters, who for some strange reason did not like the fact that I dressed at the market, and I successfully get a grant in the best technical university. It seemed so then. God, how much happiness and jubilation there was. The feeling that I had broken free. No need to grovel, to ask permission to answer the phone, to go out on the street, because I was locked up, not allowed to communicate with anyone. Only in my second year, at the age of 18, I went to my first birthday party. You won't believe it, but I did. I arrived in the capital, bright, dynamic, ambitious. On the first day, in a huge mall, seeing all these rarefied girls in heels, I just realized that I was miserable, and that was it. How do I live on a stipend that is below the cost of living? I counted pennies. There was not enough for clothes, only food. And what about plans to go abroad, to graduate school? I could not rely on anyone. The dormitory was a shock to me. All the debauchery, the university turned out to be a place where people were living it up. I did not go out of the dormitory. The pair, hungry dorm, library, on this life came to a standstill. The first semester, there were thoughts of work. But how to combine with the study? Wild fear, a strange city, loneliness, insecurity. Insecurity. Where do people live on such huge money? I am beautiful, even very beautiful. Big black eyes, long thick eyelashes, sharp cheekbones, regular facial features, shiny hair. Average height, classic female hourglass figure, small legs, and, as Kuprin said, easy breathing. And when a girl is naturally beautiful, but poorly dressed and shod compared to her more well-to-do, mediocre peers, guys' choices hurt a lot. They love with their eyes, and rags are shiny. At 17, eager to live life to the fullest and unable to buy a decent cream, he caught me. We met at the train station by some miracle. He didn't have time to buy plane tickets. My humble self was going home for the vacations. He was a former deputy minister of an industry in one of the Soviet republics, so to speak. In the present, a very successful businessman. A tall, handsome, grown man with a low, commanding voice, big hands, a real alpha male. Our seats were next to each other. A typical traffic conversation ensued. Further, I opened my soul to a stranger I thought I would never see again. How to live. What do I do to live well? To feel confident and secure? Moreover, I never considered marriage, although rich boys in Lexuses and Pradas more than once fell in love with a modest girl. He offered to help me with a job, since he owned stores, and said he had an acquaintance who could help. Honestly, I was very happy that I had found a man. It was only later that an unpleasant thought slipped into my mind that he was treating me differently. I will not describe what happened next. It would take 3 volumes, but there was the deprivation of virginity, getting expelled from university at the initiative of his wife, and pregnancy. Then, an abortion. Ah yes, before that, the fabulous life that engulfed me, a knave fool of 17 years. Beautiful clothes, expensive cars, restaurants, flowers, the feeling of complete power over him. He adored me, a little girl, carried me in his arms, kissed his feet. And I was obsessed with him. Everything that began with a desire to find a patron, ended with a frenzied passion, an overwhelming desire to belong to him. Who knew I could be so passionate? He opened a new space into which I immersed myself. Life changed. I transferred to another university, which was much better than the previous one, and stronger. I studied, closed the difference, began to learn English, worked out at the gym, rested wherever possible. I stopped counting the money. He paid for everything. I helped my parents, bought things for the house, spoiled my siblings. During the breaks, of course, there were violent quarrels, scandals, sobs at classes. But for me, the choice was already made. It was better to love a grown-up man than to love a peer sitting on a park bench. 3 years had passed. I was about to graduate, and suddenly I realized that my feelings were gone. The crazy passion was gone, and the realization that I had completely sunk into my serene existence began to press harder and harder. There were no more goals. A job. He would get me a job at a prestigious company. Housing. Buying an apartment, he promised. A car. You'll get your license in the summer, and we'll buy a little car for my favorite girl. During this time, he left his wife several times and wanted to marry me. But how? I'm 20 years younger, and my parents wouldn't accept him. He has a wife and children. I told him it was better to wait and split the company in half, or the prenuptial agreement would leave it to her. Yes, pragmatism is in my blood, except from whom the hell it comes. I got tired of their marital problems, his jealousy, and left. A year after we broke up, I got a job on my own. I provide for myself, rent an apartment, pay for English courses. There's a major exam in 2 months. I seem to have enough for everything, but the former scope is gone. The guy I'm with now is a year older than me. We graduated from university together. At the beginning, he seemed so smart and capable, and now I see that he earns less than I do, and there is no progress at work, although he has been working for the 3rd year. My ex-boyfriend offers me to go back, and I want to. They both love me still much, to tears, to self-denial. With whom to be? I don't want to live a gray, limited life with a husband who will then look at young girls. A woman's woman, especially at her age, is made by money. What should I do? I still have time to get married. I'm only 21. And with the first, I'll have all the conditions by then to support the younger and prepare the basis for a family. And with a boy the same age, I do not know. Maybe I will have to work for both of them. Although he is very good, kind, noble. But they don't give money for that. As for my feelings, I think I've grown cold to both of them. Everything hangs on what they do, and I'm like a pendulum, back and forth.